what I learned is successful people are willing to do what unsuccessful people are not. So I'm successful because I'm willing to do what you ain't willing to do. I'm willing to get up early. I'm willing to stay late. I'm willing to do that over again. And when I don't feel like doing it, I get up and I do it again. And that difference between me and you. I'm gonna keep going when I don't feel like going. You wanna go as long as it's comfortable and convenient. But then you wonder why you ain't got what I got. You ain't going where I'm going.
Welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbur Hamilton. How you doing today, my friend?
Hey, I'm blessed and highly favored.
Amen. That's always great to hear. And you all tune in to another righteous and holy episode of the Closing the Gap Podcast, where we strive to help close the gap on and provide you the tools to build generational wealth. And today our show will be entitled Managing Fluctuations. And the thought process behind today's show is that there are many different things that are happening in the market and in the news that have positive and adverse effects to your portfolio, to your savings accounts, to your retirement account, and can affect the goals that you have set for yourself. And so we want to try to give you some insight to how to manage those fluctuations. When we talk about the fluctuations, what we're saying is that, as we talk about sometimes and even last week and throughout the year, it's constant, Wilbur, that rules are going to change. You know, the stock market never stays the same. You have people entering, causing certain stocks to go up, and then exiting some, causing them to go down. And that's why we need good financial management and have a good relationship with a financial advisor like yourself, so that we can just give our money to somebody that knows what they are doing to be able to manage these fluctuations. And so if we can, let's just talk about a little bit from your perspective. How do these fluctuations kind of, come about, if you will?
Well, one thing about it is that, as we say, life is going to life. And one thing that life has shown us is that, times can and will change. So, we have to expect really the expected, because it's not even the unexpected. And a lot of times we look at the market and the corrections and the collapses and things that happen from time to time. And we, almost assume that, okay, well, these are, unexpected occurrences. These are things that are abnormal. Well, really, they have been a natural part of the ongoing cycle of the market since the markets began. Yeah. There's always been, peaks and valleys. There's always been, good times and bad times. So there's times of expansion and times of recession. Those are just natural, time frames and the natural cycles of how the market, fluctuates. And, once we understand how something works, and we understand that, what goes up must come down and vice versa, it's really more so how we handle those adverse times than trying to necessarily avoid those adverse times, because it's like life. I mean, we're all going to experience some trials and tribulations, and it's how you handle those trials and tribulations that really determine how you're going to handle your successes. And that's where, you learn about yourself. That's where you learn about, life. That's where you learn about how to, put yourself in the best situation to be successful, and how to be a bigger, better blessing to yourself and to others is by how do you handle the valley will determine how you handle the peaks. So being able to stay consistent, being able to, have a plan of action, already in place. And as we talked about, of course, on last year, for the listeners who have, we're grateful and thankful who've been tuned in with us, and they understood how important the planning was, and the preparation in the planning. And, when you've done the planning and preparation, now you're holding yourself accountable and you have aligned yourself, in the right way. Now we can really, focus and hone in on, how to maintain, because consistently doing the right things over a long period of time is what gives us success. I always say, Rome wasn't built in a day. So we understand that the market is going to have good times and bad, but it's how you stay consistently dollar cost averaging your way into the market, consistently putting money into your 401k at work, consistently saving money in your savings account, in your checking account. These are things that we have to do. Regardless of how the market is fluctuating, because it's not about what's going to happen today. It's about how we're going to handle tomorrow, because today is going to take care of itself. We've made it to today. So today will work itself out. Is what are we putting ourselves in position for the future? And how do we want that future to look? And if we're going to succumb to the pressure of what's going on today, and we're going to stop and not continue to do the things we need to do to be successful, then we've already counted out any future success we could have for tomorrow. So it's really about, understanding kind of where we are and, being able to stay calm in the middle of the storm. And that's where that alignment we always talk about, is why we always say first and foremost, how your relationship with God has to be right, has to be the central focus of everything. And if it's not, that's going to cause you to be in a state of panic all the time, because, you don't have peace. And you can't have peace if you ain't got God. So once you lock in and you're in the right alignment, and then God gives you the assignment, now we can move forward. Now we can, take a step back. We can breathe, because we can now function. And I think all of us have been in those places in life where life gets to moving so fast for us. There's so many different things going on. We feel like nothing is going right. And we just have to slow down and center ourselves and have a little conversation with Jesus and tell him about what you want.
Yeah.
And once you do that, he calms you, he settles you. And now he starts to provide you direction. Now you can just put one foot in front of the other. And then you look back and you realize that, man, if I just keep doing what I'm supposed to do, if I just keep doing and stay on course with the assignment that God has given me, if I just stay on course with the counsel that God has provided me in my life, because that's one thing that I think we fail to underestimate, is once we get in alignment and get an assignment, God starts to put the pieces to the puzzle together for us. And he puts the right people around us. And if he's led you to this show, and now you're listening to, Mr. Hamilton, the minister of money, and of course, Pastor Richardson, the minister of faith, he's put you in position around people who can provide you some counsel in various areas. And if you need help with your finances now, someone you can contact. Well, God has provided you with opportunities to have conversations with people that you can reach out to and now get help. So if you didn't know what to do, he puts you in front of someone who could help show you what to do. And now you can take that information and now you implement it. Now you can create some consistency in your life. So regardless of whether it's rain or sunshine outside, you still got to save. You still got to plan. You still got to prepare. You still got to invest. You can't stop because it's raining. We don't stop investing because there's a storm going on outside. In actuality, guess what? When can I capture the most water? It's when it's raining outside. So understand, take everything as an opportunity to get better, as an opportunity to continue to build and reinforce those good habits. Because our habits are not built in times of comfort. Our character is built in times of distress. It's how do we handle those uncomfortable situations? Do we succumb to the pressure or do we rise to the occasion?
Yeah. So the key to managing fluctuations is consistency. Consistently following the plan, consistently aligning yourself with God, and having the right alignment with the persons that you need around you, like the minister of money and the minister of faith. So consistency is the key that we want to push today when we're talking about managing fluctuations. Don't be concerned or be too consumed by all of the things that you hear. But as you hear things, and if they do get you unsettled, then make sure that you contact the right persons. And that's what Wilbert is just talking about when he's saying that he, as the minister of money, and me as the minister of faith, are options for you to contact, is that we can help quell and quiet the noise that you're hearing. Because oftentimes, Wilbert, there's a lot of noise in this, right? And things that we hear that can get us off track, that can cause us to lose sight on our own plan and start focusing on what's going on in the news, and start focusing on what one of our friends tells us they're doing on their plan. And then that can get us off track of what we're supposed to be doing. And oftentimes I believe that that's where problems come in, right? Because fluctuations are happening. Like you said, that's the norm, right? It's not being prepared for the unexpected. Like, no, this is the expected. So you should expect change. You should expect fluctuations. And now the way you manage it is stay consistent to your plan and constantly stay in contact with the minister of money and the minister of faith. So let's talk about this, right? How can we quiet ourselves from the market noise to be able to stay focused in the market truths? Because, and I think I'll give this part from my standpoint, the minister of faith. First part for that market noise versus market truth is you have to have wisdom. All right. And Ecclesiastes 7:12 tells us that wisdom is a defense, like money is a defense. But the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. So the key is having wisdom. And now we're trying to provide the wisdom that God has given us and the training that God has given us so that we can help you manage the fluctuations. And then now we're going to talk about how that wisdom will help you overcome the fear of allowing the market noise to get you off of your plan and stay focused on the market true.
Well, it's always funny because, one of the biggest factors and one of the biggest reasons why people don't make money when they invest is themselves. It's fear. It's, fear overtakes you. And it's the fear of the unknown. It's the uncertainty. It's the divisiveness that fear creates. I mean, we can, look at that and how that's permeating our culture right now. People have a fear of what they think someone may or may not do. They have a fear of how things may work out for them. And that fear causes them to react somewhat in negative characteristics. And I just like to ask people, say, when has there ever been a time where you were fearful that you operated rationally? Fear creates irrational decision making. And that's why, God didn't give us a spirit of fear. You have not because you ask not. God has said, look, my rod and my staff are going to protect you. So what are you fearing? Ain't nothing to fear but fear yourself. We in a situation where we got to understand that, our own levels of fear create bad decision making because then we start to panic. Then we start to worry. And then we do what? We react to what we think may happen. We see, things may not be as steady as we would like them to be. And we pull all of our money out of the market. And we sit on the sideline and we say, well, I'm just going to wait it out. Well, once you get to the sideline, who tells you when to get back in the game? How do you know when to get back in the game? How do you know how much to start implementing back into the game? So if you had $50,000 you had worked your way to in your 401k, and then you said, man, you let the fear overtake you, and then you pulled it all out of the market. And next thing you know, we all know time waits for no man. And time moves fast, and you look up and it's a year later, 2 years later, you're like, man, the market has been up 25% since I pulled my money out, but I haven't put it back in. So you just lost not just the 25% of gains, you've lost the time that you can't get back. And time is the greatest factor in making money. It's not just the returns in the market itself. And that's what people oftentimes don't understand, is that because you make irrational decision making, you put yourself in a position where that time value of money becomes super critical. And it's the reason why, like Vanguard does that study, every 3 years that says people with a financial advisor average a 3% greater return than people without one. It's not because the advisor, I say, is necessarily smarter than the average individual. But what we do is we can remove the decision making and the emotions from that decision making. So now we're not worried about things because we have a different level of understanding. We're not panicked about everything we listen to on the news. We understand that, guess what? The news' job is to get a reaction out of you, to insert an insight, a particular opinion, or a reaction. That's what their job is to do. So when they do that, you have to think, what are they trying to get you to buy or believe in? Well, guess what? Neither one of those things has anything to do with your money. We have to stay the course when it comes to how do we handle our money. And if anyone knows anything about our economic system and how it works, one thing about the market is that, just like life, it's going to go on. It has to. The market has to rise over time in order for our economic conditions to continue. If our stock market stabilized and didn't go any higher for the rest of our lives, we are in serious trouble, because now that creates a economic condition where there's obviously been no growth. There's been no money being made, because guess what? People want to buy stocks that are continuing to rise, right? And if no more stocks decide to go up and the stock market doesn't go up anymore, all of a sudden our way of life is completely changed. And because we live in a global economy now, it's not just our life that changed, it's the entire world has now changed. So we can understand, guess what? There's going to be new highs that are going to be hit in the stock market for the rest of our lives. That's going to continue to happen. Now, what we have to understand is, how does that affect me, and how do I take that information and utilize it to my benefit. Does that mean I go in and be all aggressive on everything? No, that's not what that means. That means that you need to look in to sign a action plan to your life based on your goals, your dreams, your objectives, your time frame, your time horizon, your own personal risk profile, and then you build out an investment philosophy based on you. Now, once we build an investment philosophy based on you, now we can stay the course through good times and bad. We can stay the course regardless of what's going on. So, we're in a situation now where, economically, this year is predicted to be another solid year. Now, we've been, well, not we, I would say the economic community has been, speaking on a potential, pullback for quite some time.
Yeah.
Those are things that have been conversations, man, when, it's time for a correction. It's been time for a correction for, I feel like almost a decade now. But the market is continuing to run the way it's been running. And over the time frame, I think what has happened and people have not been able to identify it is that, things that used to be separate had now been commingled.
Okay.
After 2008, where it used to be you had how your economy and your market work, they were almost parallel. You could kind of look and see, well, if the economy was down, then the market was going to be down, and vice versa. If the economy was good, then the market was going to be good. Well, we've had times since then where the economy has been bad, but the stock market has been good.
True.
There has been a different time frame when the economy has been good and the stock market has been down. We're in a different world now because we used to be isolated to a certain degree. It used to be what news would happen in Germany or France and these other countries. We didn't know about it until weeks later. Well, now we know about these things instantaneously. We now know that when something happens here, it affects us over there. And it happens almost immediately. So because the immediate reaction, that's filtered all the way over into our markets. So now we live in a day and age where, because it's a global economy, things are reacting so much faster. But that's a good thing because now it can help things recover that much faster as well. Mm-hmm. So we don't have the long, drawn out, market recessions like we used to have. We've had some mini corrections. We had a 20% drop in April last year, but we still finished the year up 15%. Mm-hmm. We've had, some drops. We had COVID. In 2020, the market dropped, drastically. But before the end of the year, it had already recovered.
Right.
So understanding that the things that used to take a long time to recover don't take as long anymore because of the way the markets work and because the government now has become so intertwined in certain things they used to not be involved in. Ever since, of course, 2008, where the government interjected itself, into the markets to a certain extent to stabilize things. Mm-hmm. Where the government gave bailout money, for the real estate, markets and for certain major corporations that were going out of business and, your General Motors and things of that nature, your Fords and all your different, car companies that they stepped in and say, you know what, these companies are too big to fail. Mm-hmm. So we're going to give them a little boost, and then they went back and they gave a lot of, small business owners opportunities and, even, companies that are not necessarily what we think of small business are actually considered, small business. But, you had PPP loans, you had, SBA loans and things that were given out. So there's a lot of money interjected into the economy, and what they did, it put people in a situation where the market continued to run, even though the economy was not as strong as it should have been. And that has kind of consistently been the theme of things. And of course, you marry that with, administration that has a goal of, make America great again, so to speak. And, I tell people, like I told them last year, I said, look, don't let your emotions or dislike for someone stop you from taking advantage and making money based on the things that they're doing. Yeah. I can separate my emotion from my decision making. That's what makes us human. That's what separates us from animals. Animals can't separate their feelings and their decision making. They're all one in one. We're supposed to have the ability to be able to compartmentalize and be able to analyze and say, you know what, I may feel like doing this, but what is in my best interest? So even though I don't like maybe some of the decisions this administration is making, I'm seeing what they're doing from an economic perspective and the market is doing well. How do I take advantage of that for myself? So let's be a people of making sure we maximize the opportunities. And as long as we're taking advantage of the money-making opportunities that are being presented, now at some point in time, it gives us the power maybe to go back and assist this administration in a positive direction and see how about ways we can make some changes. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner, Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And today's show is entitled Managing Fluctuations. And Wilbert, we've already talked about, some of the market truth versus the market noise, and letting everybody know that you need to make wise decisions. And the wisest decision that you can make is in managing your fluctuations of the market is being consistent. Right. And so in that consistency, we are consistent and we expect the expected that things are going to constantly change or going to always fluctuate, in the market and with the decisions that, those that are in charge will make. Right. And so as we do that, I think it's important that I remind the people that you must first keep yourself aligned with God in everything that you do, because as Wilbur said, expecting the expected, expecting that the change is going to come, is going to happen, then you have to root and ground yourself on something that is solid and unchanging, and that's God Almighty. That God is the one standard that you can always lean on and depend on. And something you had said earlier in the first segment, Wilbur, is about, ask, seek, and knock. And oftentimes I think we forget that God is available for us to, when we have the fluctuations and the market noise makes us lose sight of the truth, and we don't contact the minister of money like we should and make sure that our finances are going like they need to. We don't contact the minister of faith like we should to help lead us back to God. Then we lose sight, we lose focus now, right? And our minds have become unsettled. We've lost sight of our plan. We've lost sight of keeping ourselves aligned with everything that we're supposed to do. And now the market noise is controlling our minds and has gotten us in a fearful state. And when a fearful state, now we make silly decisions, unwise decisions. And so I want to remind everybody that the only fear that man should have is by fearing God, right? And that fear of God is really a respect for God, saying that God, you're the only one that I fear and have respect for, because I know that you're the one that is in ultimate control. That while there may be somebody in the White House, Congress, Senate, all these different positions that have an effect on me, but ultimately the only one that really controls my life is you and you alone, God. And so we submit ourselves to God. We put all our trust in God in everything that we do. So that's the outlook that we need to have spiritually at all times, no matter how much fluctuation happens, right? But we are on Closing the Gap podcast. We do have to give the people the insight that they need in dealing with financial markets and what's going on. So if you could give us the, outlook for 2026 from your view as our financial advisor, what should we be looking out for and what should we consistently do?
Yeah, well, it's always, because I tell everybody, it's always relative to you. We all have individual goals and objectives, and you want to make sure that, you're not chasing unrealistic gains, unrealistic opportunities. A lot of times, we hear about things, from coworkers and friends and family, and, it's somewhat, unrealistic. And, there's always, third party information. It's a friend of a friend of a friend said, well, they double their money in 15 minutes and they triple their money in crypto, and they did this and they did that. And, of course, we all want to have that same success and that same, get rich quick, apply to us. And obviously, anyone who understands the market and understands things don't work that way. But anything worth having is worth working for. And it's really because of what you have developed while working for it. That's why we always talk about the journey is in, the gift is in the journey, not in the destination.
Yeah.
And so what you gain, by building a plan and sticking to the plan versus what the plan actually produces is so much greater. And it's why I have so many clients. It's crazy that, they've got to a point of retirement and they have more money they can spend, but they don't even want to spend it because they've created, such a habit of living within their means and, staying consistent to their plan and living within that budget that now that they've gotten there and they've done everything they're supposed to do, they got a pension, they got Social Security, they've saved into the 401k, they save money in their investment account. And we get to this point and like, man, Mr. Hamilton, I've paid off my house. I've saved. I've done this, and man, I don't even know what I'm gonna do with all this money. I haven't, I don't have a need for it because my bills are not that high. I just, I live pretty comfortably. I can almost live on my Social Security. So, Mr. Hamilton, what do I do with my 401k? How do I, handle these additional savings? I said, well, let's sit down and we'll develop a plan on how we're gonna create a bigger legacy than what we've already created.
Yeah.
But that has been through the gift and the journey and what they've developed, and it's because they learned to not allow the emotions and to life to affect their decision making and the challenges, and it's hard to do. And of course, this year it's a new year, and I would tell people, of course, don't expect last year this year, because what happened in the market last year is not guaranteed to happen this year. It's a new day and a new age, so we have to understand that it's going to be a little different. Now, granted, we ended the year positive last year, and it was a great year. And, this year is still expected to be a positive year as well.
Yeah.
They're expecting anywhere from 8 to 18%, increase, of course, and from a market performance standpoint, based on kind of what we think the S&P will probably do for the year. And that's, 8 to 18%. That's a great year. Now, we've been blessed and we've been somewhat spoiled over the past few years. And, because we've had some years where the market was at 24, 25%. But, I would tell people, you have to remember, because the way we are wired, we forget the bad and only remember the good. And you have to remember everything in totality. So don't let, what happened yesterday, totally affect your decision making from today from a positive standpoint, because it's one of those things where we all have to keep everything in perspective, because it's all relative to what we need to have accomplished. So, because the market is expected to have, a positive year, there's some optimism, from a professional standpoint, and you marry that with some of the changes that have been made from a tax standpoint, some of the cuts that were made that benefit, certain business owners, obviously, and wealthy individuals. Those things are beneficial for the market. Now, that don't necessarily help, everybody that, down below that, but it can help you if you're investing properly, because the people that are the wealthiest, they own the companies. So it's going to affect those stock prices and those share prices. And if you're investing in the same companies that they're investing in, well, guess what? You can make the same returns that they're making inside of their stock portfolio inside of yours. So understand that, we can, benefit from what's going on around us. But we got to be in the game to win the game. So, with that being said, that is a good situation. Obviously, we've been witnessing the gradual decrease in interest rates. So, of course, that's one thing that this administration has been pushing, lower interest rates, try to reduce rates. But those are positive things for people that's looking to buy houses. For people that are looking to borrow money, for people who, looking to buy cars, or anytime those interest rates go down, that means you can afford more house. You can afford more car. You can afford, more for less. And those are always beneficial to us. That means that credit card payment may go down, just a little bit, give you a little bit of relief. So those are all things that are advantageous and beneficial, overall, with those rates continue to, decrease. So those are all positive things, but we got to look at it totality. How does it affect us? We don't want to, just assume that because the market is projected to do between 8 and 18%, that we just go and invest all one way. You take that information and then you marry it with your plan. And what is your goal and objective? Because if you were in a position where you're ready to retire at the end of this year or next year, well, just because the market is projected to do 8 to 18%, this year, doesn't mean you need to go all aggressive to try to reap all the gains that you could possibly get. We still have to be somewhat systematic in our approach. We still have to understand, okay, how much of my money can I afford to put at risk? This is why I tell people the plan is important, because the plan dictates the decision making. All too often, too many times, people are investing and buying different investment products before having a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you don't know exactly what to invest in, because you don't know the type of return you need to have in order to accomplish your goal. But if you have a plan, the plan tells you the type of return. It tells you how much money you need to invest. It gives you all of those details. So now you can pick the right product with the right investment mix that can accomplish your goal. Why you're chasing 15% gain in the market if you only need a 5% gain to accomplish your goal. But that doesn't make any sense, because now you're taking on too much risk. You won't have enough stability within your portfolio. So if there is an event, which there usually always is.
That's right.
When there is an event,
fluctuation,
how can you weather the storm? You've taken on way too much volatility. So now you just affected your future and when you may be able to retire because you were overly aggressive, because you were chasing a gain that you didn't need. So we always tell clients, I said, look, there's retirement and there's investments. Retirement is what I need to maintain my standard of living for the rest of my life. Investments are what I got left over after I've secured my retirement. We don't invest the same for both.
Yeah.
We like to make sure we compartmentalize. We always, I tell people we like to create buckets of money. What bucket do we need to start pulling water from first? Which one is going to be our income bucket? One is going to be our long-term growth bucket? Which one is going to cover our long-term care expenses? Which one is going to be prepared for our short-term needs where I got to put a new roof on the house, or I need to fix the flat tire, or I need to, get a new refrigerator, or I need to take care of certain things. I have certain medical conditions that may come up where I'm going to need to have my hands on some cash from a short-term perspective.
Yeah.
These things determine and are built into your plan. And once you build all these things into your plan, now you isolate the investments inside of your plan to accommodate each area that you have. So the longer the goal is, guess what? The more aggressive you can actually be. The shorter term the goal is, the more conservative you need to be because you need access to the money. So if I need to put money down on my house and I'm looking to buy a house in the next 6 months, I don't need to be out doing something overly aggressive and all of a sudden I take somewhat of a loss. Well, now I don't have my down payment for my home.
Right.
So understand kind of, what the market is projected to do. And then now you can take that information and you can use that to be implemented into your overall plan. So now you can make sure that you got the right alignment for your assignment.
Right. The right alignment for your assignment. That's how you manage your fluctuations, is having the right alignment for your assignment. And don't chase the predictions, right? Is basically what you're saying as well. Like, hey, stay consistent, stay aligned with your goals, with your plans, and be a good steward of what God has given us. Right? That's important. And being a steward means that I manage well what God has blessed me with. And oftentimes, to do that, we must keep in mind where our blessing has come from. Who has given me the money, who has given me the health, who has given me the opportunity to have, who has provided me the space to know Closing the Gap podcast, to access to Mr. Hamilton, the Minister of Money, access to Mr. Richardson, the Minister of Faith. Who's provided that? And all of that has been provided by God. Everything that we have comes from God, and from him we owe it all back to. And all God desires from us is to be a good steward with what God has provided us with. And God knows about the fluctuations. And so the best part, the greatest way that we can manage the fluctuation is constantly staying in contact with God and allowing God to lead and direct us on how to take care of what God has blessed us with. We would be poor, literally and figuratively, if we do not aren't good stewards with what God blesses us with, right? Because why? You end up losing it. Anybody that does not take good care of what they have, it ends up being blown in the wind. And oftentimes, in my younger days, when I was cutting hair early on, before kids and any of that, I can recall, I would come home, getting all the cash, and I would just put it into the nightstand in the apartment. And at the end of the week, on Sunday, is when I would count how much money I made. Now, mind you, I have spent money throughout the week, eating out, dates, riotous living, I would say. But at the end of the week, I still had quite a bit of money. And I oftentimes just kind of think back and say, man, had I been better with my money, had I really been counting my money during the week to really know what I had, then I would be in a better situation now. But I was a bad steward over what I had because I thought that I was doing it. I had forgotten about God and I was only focused on myself. And so my outlook at that time was only for the moment. Absolutely. I didn't have the future in mind. I was only doing what I could. I was chasing everything that the world was offering, but wasn't chasing God at all. I wasn't preparing myself for the future because I said, hey, the future is now. The future is today. The future is what I can do right now and what's right in front of me. But with our finances, as I've gotten older, I realize my mistakes. And so what we want to also do for our listeners, whether young or old, is to help you understand that you need to manage these things better by being more consistent with what you do. And then having an understanding of what's going on in the market, like you just explained with the outlook of what's going on, then that's what helps us.
Yes.
To make better decisions is being well informed. And oftentimes the misinformation and disinformation is what causes us to have fear and lose faith and lose sight and make unwise decisions because we are too focused on market noise and not the market truth. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if we talk about, AI right now, right? There's a lot of talk about how do you manage AI in this, current economic climate and world climate, right? They're trying to build different data centers. We hear the noise that AI is here to steal your job and things of that nature. And so from an investment side, Wilbert, what would you say about investing, or how do you all from your company really term and deal with artificial intelligence? Because I think that's important that we deal with it so that the people that listen to us have an understanding and be able to quell the fears of AI.
Well, the biggest thing is I always tell people, look at life as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Don't look at something as a negative. Anything that may be a threat, you need to learn about it. That's one of the things that, people, do when they're in competition. I relate everything back to sports because that's my background, kind of where I come from. And if we knew we had a tough matchup coming up, I need to watch as much film as I can to find out everything I can so I can try to identify a weakness. So where do I attack? So if AI is here and I'm somewhat fearful of AI, first question is why? And then how can I use this to my advantage? How can I take advantage of AI? Because if AI is here to stay, well, how about I learn about AI? How about I look into the companies that are pushing, this AI, narrative, so to speak, and are implementing it into their daily lives and, trying to, implement it into our daily lives. And, first thing first, it's okay, well, I want to look at it. If they're going to be pushing it, that means it's going to be money to be made. I need to be a part of the opportunity to, see a return on my investment. Well, let me find the companies that are doing AI the best and let me invest into those companies. So I want to be a beneficiary of what AI is bringing, but you have to embrace it. I mean, I've embraced it to a certain degree because I'm still learning about it.
Yeah.
But AI has been integrated into every, tool and resource that we actually have. Mm-hmm. It helps with, not necessarily, I don't like to say it helps with my decision making, but it does help with clarity from time to time. It does give you some insight and maybe some deeper insight into certain facts that you may not have been aware of. It can actually give you a different opinion if you ask it the right question. So the biggest thing is to not be fearful, is to embrace, what AI can do and learn more about it. And then now you can, ask it questions. You can, use it as it was meant to be used. So, most people use AI kind of like Google right now, and it's really a whole lot more. So, but all of our software systems, from everything from client relation systems to risk assessment systems to investment philosophy systems, everything is integrated AI into it to help build a more well-rounded experience. Mm-hmm. And I think as opposed to looking at something as a negative, we got to find the positive in it and how we can integrate it into our lives. So if AI can help you become more organized, okay, well, let's utilize it. If AI can help to give you a deeper insight for the people who don't know how to, write a book, but may want to write a book, have you ask AI to say, look, help me create an outline. This is my thoughts, my ideas, and this is my objective. Can you help me put together something? And then to give you a script or outline. So now it's taking a lot of the excuses away. Right. But, understanding the same way we talked about, this administration, not to be fearful of what the administration may do, but look at the opportunities this administration is presenting, because guess what? The administration has helped the market be somewhat positive. Let's take advantage of that. AI is doing the same thing. And we'll be right back in a minute.
back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And today we're talking about managing fluctuations. And so, Wilbert, in this last segment of the show today, let's go into talking about retirement and longevity of life. I'm reminded of the scripture, Psalm 90 and verse 16, where Psalm 91 and verse 16, where the writer says, with long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. People are living longer.
Mm-hmm.
As you said earlier, you have some retirees that they've been so consistent with changing their lifestyle and their retirement funds or where they need them to be, and it's actually over and beyond where they need to be, but they don't even spend the money now because they've created a frugal lifestyle, I would say, of how to invest and how to save. And so they've gotten used to living like that now they're not even eating all of the fruits of their labor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even in retirement, what I thought about in that is that in the retirement plan and the fact that we're living longer lives, we need to also reverse and put a spending plan to our retirement plan so that we can manage it. And that's not saying that we should just spend up the money.
Of course.
But we should definitely have a plan that aligns with our retirement, but also aligns with the long life that we're living now. Life expectancy is going up. And so if we can, let's talk about how, the retirement trends are happening now and how longevity is a blessing and how it has had an effect on us and how we should use good planning and wisdom to take care of it in a better way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ironic. I mean, I always say my old saying is I want to live to be 90 plus happy and healthy in my right mind. So, I'm going to speak it into existence every day.
Yeah.
So I got to make sure I do my part for that. I'm going to keep speaking because, hey, the Lord's going to hear my cry. So it's not going to fall on deaf ears. I know that. So, longevity has been somewhat of a gift and a curse, from a financial standpoint.
Okay.
It's going to, at some point in time, reveal the planning or lack thereof from that standpoint. So that's why, it's great to be here. But sometimes it can make you not want to be here if you ain't comfortable while you're here. So we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable. And that's why I tell people it's so important to do real financial planning and real retirement planning, because there's phases to retirement planning. There's multiple pieces, to retirement planning, and people don't understand that. And I'm saying, what do you mean? I just need to make sure I have enough money to retire. I'm like, well, but how do you ensure that? What things are you looking at? There are a lot of other different factors that go into retirement planning. So within that, you mentioned it, one of the ones you said, well, one is income planning. You have to make sure that we're going to have sufficient income that lasts me for the rest of my life. And guess what? Unless you plan on passing away tomorrow, I'm going to plan for that to be until age 100 because we need to make sure that we have enough money to sustain you. So one is income planning. Also we have to have, tax planning. Because I tell people, when you look at your 401k statement, unfortunately, I have to be the bearer of bad news. 100% of that account ain't yours. Uncle Sam is going to get his cut. He's going to get his cut right off the top. So if you're fortunate and blessed enough and you've saved and everything you're supposed to do and you got, $500,000 in your 401k account, well, you got to remember, at least 20-25% of that going to go away. And it's going to be paid in federal taxes, to the government, because you were allowed to put that money in on a pre-tax basis, and you were able to take a tax deduction up front for the contributions you made. So now the government is saying, we appreciate your contributions, but now it's time to collect. So we want to make sure that we can take, taxes off the top. So you got to have some tax planning in there. You have to have, some healthcare planning. Because if you're living longer, that means that you're going to have to see the doctor more. That means you're probably going to have, the possibility of having more ailments and more physical things happen to you. So we have to have healthcare planning in. Healthcare costs have gone up faster than anything else.
Yeah.
We witness a lot of inflation going on in our economy, but the inflation associated with healthcare is the fastest growing segment. The cost of a long-term care facility, the cost of a home healthcare system. They have these new communities now that are very, very nice, very plush and, and great to be in. But guess what? Some of those places cost $7,000, $8,000 a month. You have to understand, have you prepared for that? The average person is going to spend at least $176,000 from 65 throughout the course of their life just in Medicare costs alone.
Wow.
So you have Medicare Part B costs. You have any kind of Medicare supplement costs in order to make sure you have sufficient health care coverage, because everybody's going to get Medicare Part A when they turn 65. And then most of us are going to utilize Part B. And then if you need some type of Medicare supplement or complementary care, because guess what? Medicare only covers the first 80%. There's a 20% gap in coverage. So you got to make sure that you have some type of supplement or supplemental coverage in place to pick up that 20% gap.
Okay.
Who's going to pay those premiums for that? Where's that money going to come from? So there's going to be costs associated with living longer. And now, if the projected life expectancy is going from, went from 65 to 75 and now 75 to 85. Well, now, where it used to be a time where people were only retirement planning for 15 to 20 years. Well, now we have to plan for 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
That's a different time frame. That's a different, length of life that we have to be, that has to be accounted for. So when you have those multiple phases and now you factor in, you've done the income planning, you got the healthcare planning, you got the tax planning. Well, also you got to do some estate planning because everybody talks about this legacy they want to leave. Everybody said, well, I want to leave something to my grandkids. Well, I want to leave something to my kids. Well, that's great. But if you haven't done the planning in the other areas, there won't be an estate plan to leave. So for me, I take it personal.
Okay.
And I take my work personal. People say, well, Mr. Hamilton, you should take your work so personal. Well, no, this is not just, my work. This is my life. This is my mission. Like I said, I'm the minister of money. This is what God has called me to do. So I take it personal when I see someone not doing the necessary planning and not doing the things they need to do and not looking to seek the information, because I know God has placed me here to give you that information. You have to have all these I's dotted and T's crossed. It's not just about having a big lump sum of money and saying, oh, well, you know what? I think I got enough to retire. I'm like, well, how do you know that? Do you know exactly how the taxes or possible tax changes that can and will happen are going to affect you? Well, how do you know something based on something that ain't happened yet? You don't know. You don't know what market fluctuations lie ahead. You don't know what inflation lies ahead. You don't know what healthcare ailment or, illness lies ahead for you. You don't know these things. So how can you not know these things, but tell me you okay if you don't have a plan? No. You can tell me you're okay if you have your healthcare plan, if you got long-term care coverage, if you got, a CPA you work within your tax plan, if you have an income plan that guarantees you income for the rest of the year, and then you work with an attorney, you develop an estate plan, and you got a trust set up, and you got healthcare directive, and you got power of attorney. You have all these things put in place, so now we can make sure your assets are going to transition to the next generation accordingly. But if you haven't done any of this, if you haven't done any of that planning, there's no way to ensure. So I tell people all the time, I say, look here, you tell me you want to, leave money to the next generation. I'm going to tell you that's a bold-faced LIE. Because guess what? If you haven't done the necessary planning that comes with it, there won't be anything left to pass on to the next generation. Because if you haven't understood how taxes don't die with you, they transfer to whoever the recipient of that account is. So if you put all this money in your 401k and you don't pay the taxes on it and you pass away, and all of a sudden this money goes to your beneficiary, well, guess what? They have to pay the taxes now. Guess what? If you, figure, I get around the name of beneficiaries on my 401k account, on my bank account, on my investment account when I feel like it, well, guess what? All of a sudden, we don't know the day of the hour you pass away, and now the money's tied up in probate. Now the money's tied up in court. Now the money that your family may have needed to pay the house bills while things were going through probate, they don't have, and all of a sudden the house goes into foreclosure. Well, everything you say you work for and you want to do is not crumbling. So people perish due to a lack of knowledge. We've spoken about, the wise seek good counsel. So if you're not seeking good counsel, if you're not taking advantage of that counsel, if you're not putting together a plan of action to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, if you're not having looked at it and say, you know what, the old traditional 4% rule does not work anymore. And the reason why is that 4% rule was based on a 20-year time horizon. So a person retired at 62, 65, and, that 4% rule, you take 4% over the next 20 years, basically about 100% of your money, factor in a few market fluctuations, guess what? You should be okay. Well, that didn't work anymore because life expectancy has now grown, and now we're at a 25 to 30%, 30-year time frame. So now we have to adjust our decision making. We have to make sure that we put together an income plan and our money is going into buckets if we no longer have pensions. Because pensions have been phasing out. And people don't understand why they're phasing out. The company said it's too expensive and too costly for us to manage your money for you and to ensure that you're going to have guaranteed income for the rest of your life. There's too much liability and it's too costly for us. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take that same money we were putting away into that pension account for you, and we're going to give it to you. And we're going to let you be the captain of your fate. We're going to let you be the master of your own money. Now, you have to be the decision maker as to how you manage that. Now, they just gave you access to probably one of your greatest assets. Now, you have no knowledge, information, and resources as to how to properly handle and manage that resource. But you are managing that from the day you start working until the time you leave that job. And if you haven't sought out professional help to make sure you're making the right decisions, you've already put yourself behind the eight ball. Because guess what? We talked about the power of compound interest. We've talked about time value of money. We've talked about dollar cost averaging here on Closing the Gap. So if you're listening to us, then great. You're probably in a better place because you're able to get some of this information and hopefully implement it, if not reach out to us directly so we can help you with those things. But if you haven't, then you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're hoping you're going to be okay. You're hoping your finances are going to be taken care of, and you haven't even been able to identify, because guess what? You don't know what questions to ask because you never worked with someone to actually ask those questions. No one has talked to you about long-term care. The only way most people know about it is if when they get to a situation where they're experiencing it with a loved one. They're having to watch through their parents go through a situation. How do we take care of mom and dad? Mom had to go into hospital, or mom had to go into hospice, so dad had to go into long-term care facility, or, what is the cost of home health care? We don't usually make adjustments until we're forced to make adjustments, and it's usually too late because the situation is already smacking us in the face.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking in the scripture that comes back to mind, man, is Ecclesiastes 2:21. Says, for there's a man whose labor is with wisdom and knowledge and skill, yet he must leave his inheritance to a man who has not labored for it. And so we have to keep that in mind, that the wise saying of the teacher in Ecclesiastes has told us that what we work for, we're going to have to leave it to somebody that didn't work for. But the best thing that we can do is we can leave them with a plan.
Yeah.
Because the same fluctuations that we have to manage while we worked, while we had to use the wisdom, the knowledge, the skill to acquire what we have, we shouldn't leave them without that same wisdom, knowledge, and skill. So it's incumbent upon us to minister to them. The same way we are ministering to them, they must minister to the next generation. And that's why it's important for all of you, if you're listening, to set up your consultation with Hamilton Wealth Advisors, with Mr. Wilbur Hamilton and his company, so that you can go over your finances, look at your plan. As he stated, everybody's not talking about long-term care planning and various things that are all involved with a comprehensive plan. See, when we come on the show, we give you tidbits of these things in order to try to, guide you toward us so that you can come and get the fullness of the knowledge, because we can't give you everything on the air. But when we sit down and be able to evaluate each person's personal situation, your life situation, and what's going on, and where everything is aligned and set up for you, then we can give you the plan that fits you, because this is not a one size fit all, right? The concepts are, right, because everybody has to wear clothes. So everybody has to buy clothes, right? Everybody needs a retirement plan. But what size plan and how it fits you and what style you need is all based upon you, your family situation, and what you desire to do with your finances, and how many kids you have, right? What did your parents leave you that you have to deal with? So these are the types of things that we want everybody to contact us, so that Hamilton Wealth Advisors and Closing the Gap podcast can help you build a generational wealth. And if you have built the generational wealth, then we can help you plan for the longevity of your life and taking care of your retirement and taking care of those that are coming on behind you. So we would also, you said that, it's the gift and the curse, what I'm saying? The long living and all these things is the gift and the curse. So let's deal with this about if a person has not saved enough, right? Because, you said earlier, somebody may have $500,000 saved up in their retirement and various things that they can do. But then there's some people that listen to us, they're at zero. level. There's some that are maybe at 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. You know, there are all types of different levels, and we all try to speak to everybody and encourage everybody that no matter where you are, today is the day to start. And if you started, then it's still good to take an evaluation. So let's speak to that. If a person is at the point that they have not saved enough, and they're worried about their savings, we want to let them know that they're not alone. You don't have to feel shame, but let's give them some things with some practical strategies to, you know, work toward their retirement income.
Well, you know, it's always a couple of things. I can tell there's always more than one way to skin a cat. You know, it's one of those things we have to take a step back and say, okay, well, you know, none of us have done everything that we probably want to do. You know, I can relate back to your story where, you know, I look back at some of the money that I, you know, frivolously threw away, you know, in my younger days before I, you know, got my head on straight and I started locking in and said, man, and we all can look back and say, man, if I knew then what I know now, man, I'd be so much better off. But, you know, also you have not because you ask not. And sometimes the ask ain't instead of money, it's the information, the knowledge, you know. So now, you know, ignorance is no longer an excuse. We got to make sure that we seek the information to help us achieve the goals that we have. So, you know, it's no shame in being late to the party. The only shame is not asking where the food at when you get to the party. You know, we need to know. We need to make sure. We need to figure out, okay, well, you know what? Where am I? And if I'm a little bit late to the party and, you know, haven't done what I need to do, well, guess what? There's a couple adjustments that I can make. You know, I can maybe work a year or two longer. Maybe I can adjust the goals that I have. I may have wanted, you know, $10,000 a month to retire on. I may say, you know what? I'm cool with 5. Or I may need to focus on, you know, creating a real budget and saving strategy where I can pay off all my debt. And if I can eliminate mortgage payment, if I can eliminate all of the debt I have and I go into retirement, you know, debt free, well, now I'm in a situation where the income need is not as great. So there's always some things that we can do, but we have to take some personal accountability and seeing what can I personally do, what can I personally change, and then sticking to it. See, the problem ain't necessarily getting the diet. The problem is sticking to the diet once we get it. You know, the problem is, you know, when the hunger pain kick in, are you going to be disciplined enough to not go buy that new pair of shoes and to make sure you invest that money or to make sure you pay off that credit card bill early and not add to that credit card bill? So that's the discipline that we all have to have if we want to be where we want to, where we say we want to be, because we all say we want the house on the hill until it's time to do what it takes to get the house on the hill. So we have to be willing to make the sacrifice regardless of where we are, because it's one of those situations where they always say it ain't where you start, it's where you finish. It ain't where I'm at, it's where I'm going. So let me make sure that wherever I'm at, regardless of what I've saved or not saved, guess what? I usually can create enough. Maybe you don't understand that Social Security is going to be there for you. And all of a sudden you look up and you have a retirement plan put together for you. And now you realize, man, I forgot. I didn't calculate that. Well, that's $2,500 a month I may get from Social Security. And you know what? I did work I did go to the military, and I was in the military, and I do have a $1,200 a month, you know, military pension. And all of a sudden you look up and you got $3,700 in retirement. And you say, man, you know what? I really only need $4,000 a month to live on. Well, now you can look at, make sure you're investing enough to supplement and cover that additional shortfall from your 401k or from your investment savings. So now all of a sudden you get to retirement like, man, I actually have enough to go home and stay home. I made sure I have this long-term care coverage in place. Maybe we need to focus on other areas. Sometimes it's not always about the money. Sometimes the money, you know, is great, but, you know, money without direction can lead to chaos. Because we want to make sure that the money is going in the right places. We want to make sure we're investing in the right things. If we got all our money in cash, but we don't have any long-term care protection, all of a sudden, that can change in the blink of an eye. Because as we talked about earlier, the average cost for home health care, you know, in Alabama is about $40,000 to $50,000 per year. The average cost of a nursing home facility is anywhere between, you know, $70,000 and $80,000, and that's on the low end, you know, of facilities. So you have to think about that when you say, "Oh man, I'm good. I got $400,000 in the bank." Well, that's 4 years of, you know, long-term care facilities, and all of a sudden you're running out. And all of a sudden the legacy that you wanted to leave is now not left. So if you don't put some planning and preparation around why you're doing what you're doing, even if you're doing something, it may end up like you're doing nothing. If you don't contact us today, you may be in a situation where you're the same. See you next time.
Yes, indeed.